My name is Angelica. I'm 28 years old, and I was standing in a London conference room when my phone buzzed with a text that shattered my entire world. Sold the Anchor for $10 million. Thanks for being abroad. My sister Sophia's message made my blood run cold. The Anchor wasn't just any restaurant, it was our parents' legacy, their dying wish that we keep it in the family forever. I owned 50% and I'd never signed any papers. My hands trembled as I booked an emergency flight home to Seattle. Before we dive into how my own sister orchestrated the most devastating betrayal of my life, I want to know where you're watching from today. If you've ever dealt with family drama or betrayal, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story will show you exactly how I fought back against impossible odds. Trust me, what happens next will leave you speechless, so stay with me as I reveal how greed can poison even the closest family bonds. The moment my plane touched down at SeaTac Airport, I knew something was terribly wrong. The 40-minute drive to our family restaurant felt like an eternity, but nothing could have prepared me for what I found when I finally arrived. The Anchor, the waterfront restaurant where I'd grown up helping my mother in the kitchen and watching my father charm customers, was completely gutted. Construction crews were already tearing down the hand-carved wooden panels my grandfather had installed in 1962. I stood there in the rain, watching strangers destroy 5 generations of memories, when my phone rang. It was Sophia, and her voice held none of the warmth I remembered from our childhood. "I see you're back," she said coldly. "Meet me at Mom and Dad's house. We need to talk." The house where we'd grown up sat on Queen and Hill, just 15 minutes from the restaurant, but those were the longest 15 minutes of my life. Every red light gave me more time to wonder how this could have happened, how my own sister could have sold our family's heart and soul without my consent. Sophia was waiting in the living room, sitting in Dad's old leather chair like she owned the place, which technically, she now did. At 32, she looked every inch the successful realtor she'd become, her designer suit a stark contrast to my wrinkled travel clothes. "How could you do this?" I demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. She smiled, and it was the smile of a stranger, not the sister who used to braid my hair and share secrets under blanket forts. "I've been planning this for 2 years, Angelica," she said, pulling out a thick folder of documents. "Remember when you had that emergency appendectomy 18 months ago? You signed power of attorney papers so I could handle the restaurant while you recovered. Well, I kept that authority and used it wisely." My mind raced back to that terrifying night when I'd been rushed to the hospital, how grateful I'd been that Sophia was there to take care of everything. She'd held my hand, told me she'd handle the restaurant, promised everything would be fine. "That was for medical decisions and temporary business operations," I protested, my voice shaking. "Not for selling our parents' restaurant." Sophia's laugh was sharp, brittle. "Actually, if you read the fine print, which clearly you didn't, it gave me broad authority over all business matters." Brett helped me word it perfectly. Brett, her husband of 3 years, the investment banker, who'd always made my skin crawl with his fake smile and calculating eyes. Of course he was involved in this. "The buyer is Maxwell Sterling," she continued, watching my face drain of color. Sterling Development was notorious in Seattle for buying historic properties and turning them into luxury condos, destroying neighborhood character for profit. He's been wanting the Anchor's waterfront location for years. The city council approved his 40-story mixed-use development last month. I felt sick. Our restaurant wasn't just a business, it was where couples got engaged, where families celebrated graduations, where the community gathered after every Seahawks game. "What about the staff?" I whispered, thinking of Rosa who'd worked there for 30 years, Marcus who was putting his daughter through college, all the people who depended on the Anchor for their livelihoods. Sophia waved her hand dismissively. All terminated yesterday. No severance, the sale documents specified vacant possession. My hands clenched into fists. These weren't just employees, they were family, people who'd attended our parents' funeral, who'd kept the restaurant running when we were too grief-stricken to function. But the betrayals were just beginning. Sophia pulled out another document, and my blood turned to ice. It was a psychiatric evaluation, dated 6 months ago, claiming I was suffering from severe depression and delusional thinking following our parents' death. Dr. Harrison is prepared to testify that you're unstable, unable to make sound business decisions, she said matter-of-factly. He's been treating you for months, has extensive notes about your erratic behavior and paranoid thoughts about family members trying to steal from you. I've never met any Dr. Harrison. I shouted, jumping to my feet. This is fraud, Sophia. I'll go to the police. Her smile widened. Go ahead. Brett's uncle is the deputy police chief. Who do you think they'll believe? The stable, successful realtor with a happy marriage and strong community ties, or her mentally ill sister who's been living abroad, abandoning her family obligations? The room spun around me as I realized the depth of their planning. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, this was a carefully orchestrated conspiracy. Oh, and you might want to check your bank accounts, Sophia added casually as I headed for the door. The business account needed to be closed for the sale. That $500,000 we'd saved for renovations. Consider it my compensation for managing everything alone while you played in Europe. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers, logging into our joint business account. Zero balance. The account our father had started with his first $1,000, where we'd carefully saved every profit for improvements, empty. I stumbled out of the house, barely able to see through my tears, and almost collided with Mrs. Chen from next door. She'd been our neighbor for 20 years, had taught me to make dumplings in her kitchen. But the warm smile I expected wasn't there. Instead, she looked at me with disappointment. Angelica, she said stiffly, Sophia told us how you abandoned the family, left her to handle everything alone. Such a shame, your parents would be so disappointed. The lies were already spreading, poisoning every relationship I'd built over a lifetime. As I stood in the rain outside my childhood home, I realized this wasn't just about money or property. Sophia was systematically destroying my entire life, and she was doing it with a smile. The next morning, I woke up in my downtown apartment hoping it had all been a nightmare, but the 37 missed calls on my phone told me otherwise. Most were from reporters wanting statements about the family feud over millions, but one name made my heart sink, Aunt Catherine. She was my mother's sister, the one who'd helped raise us after Mom died, who'd always said family came first. Surely she would help me fight this injustice. I met her at her favorite coffee shop in Ballard, the one where she'd taught me to play chess and solve problems strategically. But the woman sitting across from me wasn't the aunt who'd been my champion. Her eyes wouldn't meet mine as she stirred her latte. Angelica, dear, she began, and I knew from her tone that I'd already lost her. Sophia explained everything. She showed me the psychiatric reports, the power of attorney documents. I think it's best if you accept the situation and move on. She's lying. I pleaded, reaching for her hand, but she pulled away. Kate, you know me. You know I'd never abandon the anchor. She finally looked at me, and I saw guilt flash across her face. Sophia has been very generous, she said quietly. She knows I've been struggling since Robert's cancer treatments. $200,000 goes a long way toward medical bills. The coffee cup slipped from my numb fingers, brown liquid spreading across the white tablecloth, like the stain of betrayal spreading through my family. She paid you off, I whispered. She bought your silence for money. Aunt Catherine's face hardened. Don't be dramatic, Angelica. Sophia is being practical. The restaurant was failing anyway, you were never there to help. At least this way, the family benefits from the sale. She stood up, leaving money on the table. I'm advising you as someone who loves you, take whatever settlement Sophia offers, and start fresh somewhere else. I sat in that coffee shop for an hour after she left, trying to process how money could so easily dissolve family bonds. But the betrayals were multiplying like cancer cells. My phone buzzed with a Facebook notification. Cousin Diana, Catherine's daughter, had posted a long message about mental health awareness, using me as an example without naming names. When someone you love refuses help and lashes out at family members trying to support them, she wrote, sometimes the kindest thing is to step back and let them hit rock bottom. The comments were already piling up from family friends and distant relatives, all offering prayers and support for dealing with a difficult family member. My own family was painting me as the villain in a story where I was the victim. I tried calling Uncle Robert, the family lawyer who'd handled my parents' estate. He'd always been fair, methodical, surely he would see through this web of lies. His secretary answered and put me on hold for 10 minutes, before he finally came on the line. Angelica, he said formally, nothing like the uncle who'd taught me to ride a bike. I can't discuss the restaurant sale with you. It would be a conflict of interest since I represent the family trust. I nearly dropped the phone. What family trust? What are you talking about? There was a pause. The trust Sophia established to protect family assets. I'm sorry, but I've advised her throughout this process. I suggest you find your own representation. Find my own representation. With what money? I'd just discovered my personal checking account was frozen, my credit cards maxed out with charges I didn't make. When I called the bank, they informed me that as a co-signer on various accounts, Sophia had the authority to make changes. They'd sent notifications to my old email address, the one Sophia had access to from when she managed the restaurant's social media. I was sitting on a bench in Pike Place Market, trying to figure out my next move, when I heard a familiar voice. Angelica. Is that really you? I looked up to see Jake Morrison, the man I'd dated for 3 years before we'd broken up, just before my parents died. He looked good, better than I remembered, his green eyes full of concern as he sat down beside me. I heard about what's happening, he said softly, taking my hand. I can't believe Sophia would do this to you. You must be devastated. For the first time in days, someone was showing me genuine compassion, and I broke down completely. Jake held me while I sobbed, whispering reassurances, telling me everything would be okay. He offered to let me stay at his apartment while I sorted things out, said he still cared about me, had never stopped caring. I should have been suspicious. Jake had cheated on me with his co-worker, had told me I was too focused on the restaurant, too boring for his lifestyle. But I was drowning and he was offering a lifeline. For 3 days, he was perfect. He brought me coffee, listened to my plans to fight back, even offered to loan me money for a lawyer. He asked detailed questions about the sale, about what evidence I had, who might support me. I thought he was trying to help. Then I found his phone open to a text conversation with Brett. She doesn't suspect anything. Told me everything about the safety deposit box her parents left. We'll find out the location tomorrow. My blood turned to ice. The one secret I'd kept, the one piece of hope I'd held onto, and I'd almost given it away to another traitor. I scrolled up through weeks of messages. Jake had been recruited months ago, promised a management position in one of Sterling's new developments. I confronted him immediately, and the mask finally dropped. You always were too trusting, Angelica, he said with a shrug. Sophia knew you'd come running to me eventually. Though I have to admit, the past few days were fun. You were always good in bed when you were emotional. I slapped him hard enough to leave a mark and walked out with what little dignity I had left. But the betrayals kept coming like waves during a storm. I'd reached out to Melissa Chen, my best friend since middle school, the maid of honor at the wedding I'd planned before Jake cheated. She'd been oddly distant since I returned, but I attributed it to shock over the situation. When she finally agreed to meet me, I knew immediately something was wrong. She kept checking her phone, wouldn't make eye contact, and when I asked if she'd heard anything that might help my case, she burst into tears. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I've been dating Brett's brother Carl for 6 months. They promised me I could manage the restaurant in their new development, a real upscale place. I just told them little things, like when you'd be traveling, your routines, nothing important. Nothing important. Just everything Sophia needed to time her betrayal perfectly. You've been spying on me for 6 months?" I asked, my voice hollow. "Every coffee date, every phone call where I talked about my struggles, you were reporting back to them." She nodded miserably. "They said you were planning to sell anyway, that Sophia was just protecting family interests." I didn't know about the forgery until yesterday, I swear. I left her crying in that restaurant, but I had no pity left. My family, my ex-boyfriend, my best friend, all turned into weapons against me. That night, I returned to my apartment to find the door ajar. Everything was destroyed. My laptop with all my business records, gone. Physical files, shredded. Photo albums of my parents, torn apart. But they'd made one mistake. They'd left a threatening note. "Stop fighting or lose more than money." I called the police, but the officer, who showed up, seemed more interested in questioning me than investigating the break-in. We've had reports of you harassing your sister, making threats. Are you sure this isn't just a domestic dispute that got out of hand?" I realized then that Sophia had already laid the groundwork, filed false reports painting me as unstable and dangerous. Every institution designed to protect citizens had been turned against me. My credit cards weren't just maxed out, they'd been used for purchases at liquor stores and cannabis dispensaries, creating a paper trail of someone spiraling out of control. My professional reputation was being destroyed on LinkedIn, where someone using my account was sending unhinged messages to business contacts. Even my car had been repossessed, claimed by a lender I'd never heard of, using documents I'd never signed. Standing in my ransacked apartment, I realized I was completely alone. Every person I'd trusted had been bought, threatened, or manipulated into betraying me. But sometimes when you lose everything, you discover what you're really made of. And I was my father's daughter. He'd built the anchor from nothing, survived bankruptcy, recession, and personal tragedy. I might be down, but I wasn't out. Not yet. After spending a sleepless night in my destroyed apartment, I knew I needed help beyond what any single lawyer could provide. Maxwell Sterling's web of corruption ran deep through Seattle's power structure. A quick search revealed disturbing patterns: 12 historic properties bought and demolished in the past 5 years, each sale surrounded by allegations of intimidation and fraud that never stuck. 3 judges had dismissed cases against Sterling Development, all of them regular attendees at Sterling's famous charity galas. I found temporary refuge with Rosa Martinez, the anchor's head cook for 30 years. She lived in a modest apartment in the Central District with her daughter Carmen, and when she opened the door to find me standing there with nothing but a backpack, she pulled me into a fierce hug. "Mija," she whispered, "I knew they were lying about you. Your father would roll over in his grave if he knew what Sophia was doing." Rosa made me coffee while filling me in on what happened after the staff was terminated. No warning, just security guards escorting us out like criminals. 30 years I gave to that place, and they wouldn't even let me take my grandmother's recipe book from the kitchen. Her eyes burned with anger. But I'm not the only one who's mad. Marcus has been documenting everything, taking pictures of Sterling's people removing things from the restaurant before the sale was even public. This gave me hope. If we could prove Sterling had prior knowledge and access, it might void the sale. I needed legal help, but every lawyer I called either had conflicts of interest or quoted retainers I couldn't afford. Finally, legal aid connected me with James Crawford, a young attorney fresh out of law school who was eager to take on corporate corruption. He had the kind of righteous anger that reminded me of my father when he'd fought city council over protecting small businesses. James dove into the case with enthusiasm, spending hours reviewing the documents I'd managed to save in cloud storage. "This is definitely fraud," he said after 2 days of research. The power of attorney was clearly limited in scope, and look here, the notary who witnessed your signature. She lost her license last year for falsifying documents. Plus, the anchor is listed on the Historic Business Registry. Any sale requires a 60-day public comment period that never happened. We spent days building our case. James found 17 violations of city ordinances in the sale process. The demolition permits were issued before the sale was finalized. Environmental assessments were waived despite the waterfront location requiring them. Money had changed hands through offshore accounts that screamed money laundering. Sterling's empire was built on exactly these kinds of corrupt deals, but this time we had proof. I was starting to feel hopeful again, when James suggested we meet at a new location for security. He chose an upscale bar in Belltown, which seemed odd for a legal aid lawyer, but I was too desperate to question it. He ordered expensive whiskey, and started asking different questions than before. "So this safety deposit box Rosa mentioned," he said casually, "where exactly did your parents keep it? We should secure any evidence before Sterling's people find it." Something in his tone made me freeze. I studied his face more carefully and noticed things I'd missed in my desperation: the Rolex barely hidden under his cheap suit sleeve, the Mercedes key fob he quickly pocketed. "You're not really from legal aid, are you?" I asked quietly. His facade cracked slightly before he smiled. "Very good, Angelica. Uncle Maxwell said you were smarter than Sophia gave you credit for." "Yes, I'm Sterling's nephew. Harvard Law, class of 2019. This was supposed to be easy: get your trust, find out what evidence you have, make it disappear. Everything you found, the violations, the fraud?" I asked, my heart sinking. He laughed. "Oh, that's all real. But who's going to prosecute?" "The DA is at our Martha's Vineyard house right now. The city inspector owes us 300 grand in gambling debts. The media. We own 40% of the local news station." He leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me where that safety deposit box is, then you're going to leave Seattle. Tonight. Or tomorrow's headlines will be about your drunk driving arrest." "I don't drink and drive," I said firmly. "I don't have to." "Your blood alcohol was 0.12 when they tested you an hour ago. Amazing what a few drops in your whiskey can do. Officer Mitchell is waiting outside to arrest you unless you cooperate." I looked toward the door and saw a uniformed cop watching us through the window. The trap was perfect. Even the bartender was avoiding my eyes, clearly paid off. "You have 5 minutes to decide," James said, checking his phone. "Tell me about the box, or spend tonight in jail with a DUI that will destroy any credibility you have left." I thought frantically. Rosa had mentioned the box, but I didn't know where it was. My parents had been secretive about some things, especially after they started having concerns about Sophia's husband. Then I remembered something my father used to say: the most important things hide in plain sight. It's in the restaurant, I lied smoothly. Hidden in the walk-in freezer behind a false panel. But you'll need my fingerprint to open it. Dad installed a biometric lock. James studied my face, then nodded. Nice try, but we already gutted the freezer. You're lying. He signaled the officer, who started walking toward the entrance. In desperation, I grabbed a water glass and smashed it against the table, holding a shard to my own throat. One step closer, and I'll make sure you have to explain a suicide to your uncle, I hissed. The bar erupted in screams. Someone called 911, and suddenly we had an audience. James couldn't have me arrested now without witnesses asking questions. In the chaos, I slipped out the back, running through alleys I'd known since childhood. But I couldn't run forever, and they knew it. The next morning, Rosa woke me with devastating news. Carmen never came home last night, she said, tears streaming down her face. Then I found this. She handed me a note in her daughter's handwriting. Mom, I'm sorry. They offered me $50,000 to help them. I'm so tired of being poor. Don't look for me. The betrayal hit harder because I'd watched Carmen grow up, had helped her with homework at the restaurant. An hour later, my rental car was pulled over for a broken taillight I knew hadn't been broken that morning. The officer found a bag of pills under my seat, planted there by someone with access. This time, the arrest was real. I spent 18 hours in jail before Rosa could bail me out using her life savings. The charges would stick unless I could prove the drugs were planted, but the security footage from the parking garage had mysteriously disappeared. Sterling's people were closing every avenue of escape, but they'd made one crucial error. They assumed the safety deposit box was about money or property deeds. They didn't understand my parents at all. Dad had always said the restaurant's true value wasn't in its real estate, but in its role in the community. The box wasn't about financial documents, it was about something much more dangerous to Sterling, the truth. Sitting in Rosa's kitchen after making bail, I knew I had to change tactics. Playing defense while Sterling's machine destroyed my life was a losing game. I needed to go on offense, but first I needed to find that safety deposit box. My father had been a cautious man who believed in backup plans. He wouldn't have told Sophia about something so important, but he would have made sure I could find it. I remembered his last birthday, 6 months before the car accident that killed both my parents. He'd pulled me aside after dinner, slightly drunk on good wine. Angelica, if anything happens to us, remember that truth is the best anchor. Seattle Credit Union, where we opened your first savings account. You'll know what to do. I'd thought it was morbid talk and changed the subject. Now I understood it was a message. Seattle Credit Union still had the same faded sign from my childhood. The elderly manager, Mrs. Tanaka, remembered me. Your father was very specific, she said, leading me to the vault. Only you could access this box, and only after providing 3 pieces of information: your first pet's name, the date you broke your arm falling off the pier, and your mother's maiden name. Information Sophia wouldn't know, because she'd been away at college when these things happened. Inside the box were documents that made my hands shake. Contracts, showing Sterling had been trying to buy the anchor for 8 years. Each offer was attached to threats when my parents refused, health inspections that found mysterious violations, suppliers suddenly canceling contracts, customers getting food poisoning from meals they never ate. But the real bombshell was a recording device with dozens of conversations between Sterling, city officials, and Brett discussing illegal demolitions, bribery, and money laundering through construction projects. There was also a letter from my father. My darling Angelica, if you're reading this, something has happened and Sophia has likely betrayed us. We've known about Brett's influence on her for 2 years. The evidence here should protect you and the anchor. Contact Naomi Park at the Seattle Tribune. She's been investigating Sterling for years, but needs proof. Trust no one else in media. Be brave, my daughter. The truth will set you free. Naomi Park was a name I recognized, a Pulitzer-nominated investigative journalist who'd exposed corruption in the police department. Getting to her safely was another matter. Sterling had people watching me, following my every move. But I had an advantage now. I knew who some of them were. The sedan that tailed me to the credit union, the woman who'd sat too close at the coffee shop. I was learning their patterns. I used Rosa's computer to create an encrypted email account and reached out to Naomi with a simple message. I have what you need on Sterling. Pike Place at noon. Fish throwing station. Public, crowded, hard to make someone disappear. She responded within an hour, bring copies. They killed my last source. Those words chilled me, but I was past the point of backing down. I spent the morning making copies of everything, uploading files to multiple cloud services, mailing USB drives to lawyers in other cities. If something happened to me, the truth would still come out. Rosa helped, her anger at Carmen's betrayal channeling into determination to see justice done. Naomi was exactly what I'd expected, sharp-eyed, cautious, dressed to blend into crowds. She listened to my story without interrupting, her expression darkening with each revelation. When I played her a recording of Sterling discussing bribing Judge Watson, she actually smiled. I've been trying to nail him for 5 years, she said. This is enough to bring down his whole network. But we need to be smart. He has judges, police, even editors in his pocket. We developed a strategy. Instead of going to local authorities, we'd contact the FBI's Public Corruption Unit and the State Attorney General simultaneously. Naomi had connections at national newspapers who could run the story if local media buried it. But first, we needed more evidence, particularly about Brett's role in defrauding other families. Sterling was the kingpin, but Brett was his weapon. Playing the broken, defeated sister, I reached out to Sophia. You win, I texted her. I can't fight anymore. Can we meet? I just want enough money to start over somewhere else. Her response was predictably gloating, finally coming to your senses. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., the Edgewater Hotel. Come alone. The Edgewater was where our parents had celebrated their anniversaries, a cruel choice on Sophia's part. I arrived early, choosing a table where I could see all entrances. Hidden in my purse was a recording device Naomi had given me, much more sophisticated than anything available in stores. Sophia swept in wearing designer clothes that probably cost more than most people's cars, Brett trailing behind her like an attack dog. You look terrible, she said, sitting down with false concern. See what happens when you fight the inevitable. All this stress for nothing. Brett smirked, his satisfaction obvious. We're prepared to offer you $200,000 to sign a non-disclosure agreement and leave Washington state permanently, he said, sliding documents across the table. Generous, considering the trouble you've caused. I let my shoulders slump, playing defeated. How did you do it? I asked quietly. The psychiatric evaluation, the forgery, getting everyone to turn against me. I just want to understand. Sophia laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. Poor naive Angelica. You were so easy to manipulate. Did you know I've been planning this since Mom and Dad died? Brett showed me how much the restaurant was really worth, how foolish we were to keep serving fish and chips when we could be millionaires. She was on a roll now, ego inflating with every word. The psychiatric evaluation was simple. Brett's friend from medical school owed him money. A few backdated session notes, some creative writing about paranoid delusions, and suddenly you're unstable. The power of attorney. You were so drugged after surgery, you would have signed anything. I told you it was for insurance purposes. But the poison, I said carefully, remembering what she'd revealed in anger days ago. You said you poisoned me before the surgery. That seems extreme. Brett's face went white, but Sophia was too drunk on victory to notice. Not poison exactly, she corrected. Just something to ensure you'd need that appendectomy sooner rather than later. A little bacteria in your food, completely untraceable. Brett has connections at the hospital who made sure I was your emergency contact. The confession hung in the air like a death sentence. Attempted murder, fraud, conspiracy, it was all there. But I needed more. What about the others? Have you done this before? Brett couldn't help himself. 12 properties in 5 years, he bragged. Though none as valuable as the anchor. My parents' bakery was just practice. They never suspected their loving son was behind their bankruptcy. I thought of Brett's parents, kind people who'd sent flowers to my parents' funeral, now living in a tiny apartment after losing everything. The recording device in my purse was capturing every word, but I pushed further. And Sterling. What's his real plan for the waterfront? Money laundering paradise, Brett explained, warming to his topic. Construction costs can be inflated infinitely. Dirty money goes in, clean money comes out through property sales. The FBI has been sniffing around his Chicago operations, so he needs new territory. Seattle's perfect. Corrupt enough to work with, clean enough to look legitimate. Sophia finally noticed Brett's loose tongue. Shut up, she hissed at him, then turned to me. Sign the papers or rot in jail on drug charges. Your choice. I pretended to read through the documents while processing everything I'd learned. They'd confessed to crimes that would put them away for decades. Now I just needed to survive long enough to use it. I'll sign, I said quietly, but I want the money transferred first. I don't trust you to pay after I sign. Sophia laughed. You're in no position to make demands. I stood up slowly. Then I guess we're done here. Enjoy your victory, Sophia. I hope it was worth destroying our family. As I walked away, she called after me. Wait. Fine, we'll transfer half now, half after signing. But I kept walking. I had what I needed. The recording was clear, their confessions undeniable. Now it was time to bring their empire crashing down. But Sterling had one more card to play, and it nearly killed me. The day after recording Sophia and Brett's confessions, I was driving Rosa's old Honda when the brakes failed on a steep hill near the university. Only quick thinking and a convenient hedge saved me from plowing into Lake Washington at 60 miles per hour. When the mechanic examined the car, he found clear evidence of sabotage. Someone who knew what they were doing cut these lines, he said. You're lucky to be alive. Sterling was escalating from legal harassment to attempted murder. But his desperation meant we were close to bringing him down. Naomi had shared our evidence with FBI agent Patricia Dalton, who specialized in public corruption cases. Agent Dalton was a small woman with intense eyes who'd brought down 3 crime families in New York before transferring to Seattle. More importantly, she had no local connections for Sterling to exploit. This is the most comprehensive evidence package I've seen on Sterling, she said during our clandestine meeting at a hotel near the airport. But we need more on the money laundering. Financial crimes are easier to prosecute than bribery or attempted murder. Can you get access to Sterling Development's banking records? I thought of someone who might help, Linda Morrison, Brett's ex-wife. He'd divorced her 3 years ago under mysterious circumstances, leaving her with minimal alimony despite 10 years of marriage. If anyone had dirt on Brett's financial dealings, it would be her. Finding her took some detective work, but Marcus from the restaurant knew her sister and made the connection. Linda lived in a modest apartment in Tacoma, a far cry from the Bellevue mansion she'd shared with Brett. When I explained who I was and why I was there, her face hardened with recognition. "That bastard destroyed my life too," she said, inviting me in. "But I got smart before the divorce. I copied everything." She showed me external hard drives full of financial records, emails, and recordings. "Brett thought I was too stupid to understand his business," she explained. "But I have an accounting degree. I knew he was laundering money through construction projects, inflating costs, using shell companies. Here's the best part." She pulled up an audio file on her laptop. It was Brett on a conference call with Sterling and several others, discussing how to move $20 million from a Mexican cartel through the Seattle waterfront development. They talked about bribing specific inspectors, which judge would approve permits, how to structure payments to avoid federal oversight. It was a criminal conspiracy laid bare in their own words. "There's more," Linda said, her eyes gleaming with long-awaited revenge. "My son Tyler worked as an intern at Sterling Development last summer. He has recordings of Brett planning your restaurant theft, including discussions about what to do if you fought back. The break sabotage. Brett ordered it personally." Tyler, now a college senior studying journalism, was eager to help expose the man who'd destroyed his family. His recordings were devastating, capturing Brett casually discussing forging documents, poisoning me, and even joking about having me disappear, if necessary. The young man's hands shook as he played them for me. "I wanted to warn you," he said, "but I was terrified they'd hurt my mom." Armed with this evidence, Agent Dalton secured federal warrants. The raid on Sterling Development was scheduled for Friday morning, but Thursday night, Sophia called me in tears. "Angelica, I need your help," she sobbed. "Brett's leaving me. He's been having an affair with someone named Taylor, and he's hidden all our money. I can't access any accounts. I know I've been horrible, but you're still my sister." Part of me wanted to hang up, let her suffer the consequences of her choices. But I heard real terror in her voice. "Where are you?" I asked. She was at a hotel in SeaTac, afraid to go home. When I met her there, flanked by Rosa and Marcus for protection, I hardly recognized my sister. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, her perfect makeup smeared with tears. "He played me," she whispered. "Everything he promised, all lies. The moment escrow closed on the anchor, he transferred the money to accounts I can't touch. His mistress Taylor works at the bank. She's been helping him hide assets for months. He even filmed us discussing the fraud, says he'll release it if I don't sign divorce papers giving him everything." The irony was thick enough to choke on. Sophia had betrayed everyone who loved her for a man who'd been planning to betray her from the start. But her misery gave us an opportunity. "Help us," I said simply. "Testify against Brett and Sterling. Tell the FBI everything. It's the only way to protect yourself." She looked at me with desperate hope. "You'd help me after everything I've done." I thought of our parents, how they'd want me to handle this. "I'll never trust you again," I told her honestly. "But you're still my sister. Help us put these men in prison, and we'll figure out the rest." The next morning's raid was spectacular. FBI agents swarmed Sterling Development's offices, while simultaneous raids hit Brett's home, Sterling's mansion, and a dozen other locations. The local news, finally free from Sterling's influence, covered it breathlessly. By noon, Sterling, Brett, and 14 others were in federal custody facing charges of money laundering, bribery, fraud, and racketeering. But the best moment came when Agent Dalton called with news about the anchor. "The sale is being voided," she said. "Multiple instances of fraud, forgery, and coercion make it invalid. The restaurant is yours again, though I'm afraid there's significant damage from the demolition they started." I stood in the ruins of my family's restaurant that afternoon, walls torn open, kitchen equipment stolen, memories scattered like debris. But the foundation was solid, the bones of the building intact. We could rebuild. The community was already rallying, with former customers starting a fundraising campaign that raised $50,000 in its first day. Sterling's empire crumbled quickly once the FBI started pulling threads. 47 city officials were indicted. 3 judges resigned in disgrace. The conspiracy reached into the state legislature, the Port Authority, even the governor's office. Sterling himself, faced with evidence of cartel connections, was looking at life in prison. He'd built his kingdom on intimidation and corruption, but truth and justice had brought it down. Brett tried to flee the country, but was arrested at the Canadian border with $2 million in cash and fake passports. His mistress Taylor testified against him in exchange for immunity, revealing offshore accounts holding stolen millions. The government seized every asset they could find, though much of the money had already vanished into the labyrinth of international finance. 3 weeks after the arrests, I stood in King County Superior Court watching Sophia testify against her soon-to-be ex-husband. She detailed every crime, every conspiracy, every betrayal with the same cold efficiency she'd used to steal our restaurant. Brett sat at the defense table, his handsome face twisted with rage as his perfect plan unraveled. His lawyer tried to paint Sophia as the mastermind, but the evidence overwhelmingly showed Brett pulling the strings. "He told me family loyalty was weakness," Sophia testified, her voice steady despite the tears. "He said Angelica would never have the spine to fight back, that people like us were sheep waiting to be sheared. He had files on everyone, leverage he'd gathered for years. My prescription anxiety medication. He got me addicted deliberately, said it made me more manageable." The prosecutor introduced evidence that made the courtroom gasp. Brett hadn't just targeted our family. Over the past decade, he'd helped Sterling destroy 17 family businesses, stealing generational wealth from immigrant families, elderly owners, anyone vulnerable to their tactics. The Pham family's grocery store, the Kowalski's hardware store, the Jackson family's jazz club, all lost to forged documents and fabricated violations. During a recess, Sterling's nephew James approached me. Without his confident facade, he looked young and scared. "I'm testifying for the prosecution," he said quietly. "My uncle threatened my mother when I tried to quit after meeting you. I recorded the threat. I'm sorry for my part in this. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I wanted you to know." The trial revealed Sterling's operation was even more extensive than we'd thought. He had $60 million flowing through Seattle construction projects from various criminal organizations. The FBI discovered he'd ordered the deaths of 2 previous people who'd tried to expose him, though he'd made them look like accidents. My brake failure could have been the third. One morning, I arrived at court to find Carmen waiting for me. Rosa's daughter looked haggard, ashamed. "They threatened my mom," she whispered. "Said they'd burn down the apartment with her inside if I didn't help them. After you were arrested, I ran. I've been hiding, but I heard Mom was safe now. Can you forgive me?" I hugged her as Rosa appeared, mother and daughter reuniting with tears and recriminations that would take time to heal. The demolition of the anchor was scheduled to continue despite the legal proceedings, Sterling's last act of spite. But the community wasn't having it. The morning the wrecking crew arrived, they found 300 people surrounding the building. Former customers, employees, fellow restaurant owners, even some city council members who'd found their spines after Sterling's arrest. The demolition company, suddenly lacking political cover, retreated. Local news covered the story extensively. Community saves historic restaurant, made headlines across the Pacific Northwest. Donations poured in from across the country. A famous Seattle chef offered to help redesign the kitchen. Construction companies, eager to distance themselves from Sterling's corruption, offered services at cost. The restaurant that Sterling tried to destroy was becoming a symbol of resistance against corporate greed. During all this, Aunt Catherine approached me at the courthouse. "I'm ashamed," she said simply. "I let money override family. Your mother would never forgive me." She handed me a check. "The bribe money, plus interest. Use it to rebuild." It was a start toward reconciliation, though trust would take longer to rebuild than any restaurant. The verdicts came down like dominoes. Sterling, guilty on all counts, life without parole. Brett, 35 years federal prison. Sophia, 5 years for fraud, though her cooperation earned leniency. 17 other conspirators received sentences ranging from 2 to 20 years. The corruption network, that had seemed invincible, was destroyed in months once people found the courage to speak truth. At Brett's sentencing, he gave a statement that revealed his true nature. "I'm only guilty of being smarter than everyone else," he sneered. "In 5 years, I'll be running the prison. In 10, I'll be out on appeal. People like me always win because people like you are too weak to do what's necessary." The judge added 5 years for lack of remorse. Sophia's sentencing was harder to watch. My sister, who'd once braided my hair and shared dreams, stood before the judge in orange jail clothes. "I betrayed everything our parents taught us," she said, reading from prepared remarks. "I chose greed over family, lies over truth. I destroyed the most precious things in my life for money I never even got to keep. I'm sorry, Angelica. I know that's not enough, but I'm sorry." The judge, Marvin Chen, had known our parents. "This court has seen many crimes," he said, "but betraying family trust for money ranks among the most painful. However, your cooperation prevented greater crimes. 5 years federal prison, 3 years supervised release, and you must pay restitution to your sister for all damages." It was fair, maybe even lenient, but it meant Sophia would miss 5 years of life while I rebuilt what she'd helped destroy. That night, I stood in the Anchor's damaged dining room with Rosa, Marcus, and the core team ready to rebuild. The walls had holes, the kitchen was gutted, but we had something Sterling could never buy or steal: community. The next morning, we'd start reconstruction. It would take months of hard work, but the Anchor would sail again. "Your parents would be proud," Rosa said, her arm around my shoulders. "You fought the devil and won." I thought of Mom and Dad, their dream of a place where families gathered, where memories were made over good food and honest service. Sterling had tried to turn it into another soulless development, but love had proved stronger than greed. The Anchor would rise again, better than ever. 6 months after the trial, the Anchor reopened to a line of customers stretching around the block. The rebuilt restaurant honored its history while embracing the future. Original wooden beams salvaged from the demolition stood alongside modern kitchen equipment. Photos of 5 generations of family memories lined the walls, including one of my parents on their wedding day, standing in front of the original Anchor sign. The opening night was emotional for everyone. Rosa ran the kitchen, with her traditional recipes plus new creations inspired by Seattle's diverse communities. Marcus managed the front of house, with military precision softened by genuine warmth. Even Aunt Catherine was there, working the register like she had in college, trying to earn forgiveness through action rather than words. Speech, the crowd chanted as I stood in the dining room my grandfather had built. I thought of everything we'd lost and found, the betrayals and reconciliations, the pain that had led to this moment of joy. The anchor has weathered its worst storm, I began, my voice stronger than I felt. We're here because this community refused to let greed win. Tonight, we don't just celebrate a restaurant reopening. We celebrate truth defeating lies, love conquering fear, and family meaning more than blood. The applause was thunderous, but the best moment came when Mrs. Chen from next door hugged me. "I'm sorry I believed the lies," she whispered. "Your parents raised a warrior." One by one, people who'd been fooled by Sophia's deception apologized and welcomed me home. The community that had been fractured was healing, stronger for having been tested. 3 months into our reopening, I received a letter from federal prison. Sophia's handwriting was still perfectly neat, though the stationery was institutional grey. "Dear Angelica," she wrote, "I've had time to think about everything I threw away. The money Brett promised seems like a sick joke now. I had everything, a sister who loved me, parents who built something real, a community that cared, and I traded it for a con man's lies and promises that turned to ash." She continued, "I don't expect forgiveness. I poisoned you, betrayed you, tried to destroy your life. But I want you to know I'm getting help. Real therapy, not the fake sessions Brett arranged. I'm learning why I was so easily corrupted, why money mattered more than family. Maybe when I get out, I can find a way to make amends. Not for forgiveness, but because it's right. Give Rosa my love. Tell her I'm sorry about Carmen. We all got played. I visited her once, 3 months later. The maximum security facility was a harsh place for someone who'd worn designer clothes and lived in luxury. Sophia looked older, harder, but also clearer somehow. We sat across from each other at a metal table, guards watching, the weight of everything between us. "I dream about Mom and Dad," she said quietly. "They don't say anything, just look at me with such disappointment. Is the restaurant really rebuilt?" I showed her photos on my phone, watched tears roll down her cheeks. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Better than before. You always were the strong one. I was just too jealous to see it." "Why?" I asked the question that had haunted me. "Why did you do it?" "We had enough. The restaurant supported us both." She was quiet for a long moment. "Brett made me feel special," she finally said. "Like I was destined for more than serving fish and chips. He said you were holding me back, that family was a chain keeping me from wealth and success. By the time I realized he was the chain, it was too late. I left the prison with mixed emotions. Forgiveness would come slowly, if at all. But I'd needed to see her, to understand that the sister I'd loved hadn't been entirely replaced by greed. She was paying for her choices, but maybe she could find redemption eventually. People had surprised me throughout this ordeal, for bad and good. Perhaps Sophia could surprise me again someday. The anchor thrived in its second incarnation. We instituted a profit-sharing program for employees, ensuring they'd never be vulnerable to sudden termination again. Part of the building became a legal aid clinic, helping other families fight against predatory developers. We hosted free meals for seniors on Mondays, cooking classes for at-risk youth on Wednesdays, and community gatherings that turned strangers into neighbors. One evening, as I was closing up, I found a package in the mail with no return address. Inside was a key and a note in my father's handwriting, "For my brave daughter who kept the faith." Sometimes the greatest treasures aren't in safety deposit boxes, but in the hearts we touch. Check the basement wall behind the old furnace. All my love, Dad. My hands shook as I descended into the basement with Marcus and Rosa. Behind the furnace, hidden by decades of dust, was a small door I'd never noticed. The key fit perfectly. Inside was a time capsule of sorts. Photos of every family who'd celebrated at the Anchor, letters from customers whose lives we'd touched, and a journal my father had kept for 40 years detailing not finances, but memories. The last entry, dated a week before my parents died, read, "If you're reading this, Angelica, then you've proven what I always knew, that you have the strength to weather any storm. The Anchor's true value isn't in its real estate, but in its soul. Your mother and I built more than a restaurant. We built a place where love lives. Keep that alive, and you'll always be rich in ways Sterling could never understand. P.S. There's also $2 million in bonds behind the panel. We saved every penny for a rainy day, and protecting our legacy seems like the rainiest day of all." I sat on that dusty basement floor and cried, not from sadness, but from overwhelming love. My parents had prepared for betrayal, had hidden away both the sentimental and practical tools I'd need to survive. The bonds would secure the Anchor's future, let us expand the legal clinic, help other families facing Sterling-style predators. Even in death, my parents were taking care of me. Sterling died in prison 8 months after his conviction, a massive heart attack that conspiracy theorists attributed to various causes, but doctors confirmed was the natural result of a lifetime of rich food and corruption eating him from inside. His empire was fully dismantled, assets distributed to victims, though most families recovered only a fraction of what they'd lost. Brett survived multiple attacks in prison before being transferred to solitary confinement, his charm useless among hardened criminals. A year after reopening, we held a memorial dinner for my parents on what would have been their 40th anniversary. The restaurant was packed with people sharing memories, their voices creating a symphony of lives touched by simple kindness and good food. Tyler Morrison, Brett's son, was there as our new assistant manager, determined to be the man his father never was. Even Carmen had returned, working alongside her mother with quiet determination to make amends. As I stood in the kitchen my mother had loved, preparing her famous seafood chowder from memory, I realized the true victory. Sterling had tried to reduce everything to money, to transform love into leverage, and trust into transactions. He'd failed because he never understood that some things can't be bought or stolen. The connections between people, the memories made over shared meals, the integrity passed from parent to child, these are treasures no corruption can touch. "You did it, Mija," Rosa said, hugging me as the dinner service ended successfully. "You saved more than a restaurant. You saved a family's honor." I hugged her back, this woman who'd stood by me when blood relatives hadn't, who'd shown me that family is about choice as much as chance. The Anchor had taught me its greatest lesson: when storms come, we don't weather them alone. We drop anchor in the harbor of community, and ride out the waves together. The restaurant's neon sign glowed in the Seattle twilight, a beacon for anyone seeking honest food and genuine connection. Inside, laughter mixed with the clink of glasses, new memories layering over old ones. I thought of Sophia in her cell, of Sterling in his grave, of Brett in his isolation, all prisoners of their own greed. Then I looked at the thriving restaurant, the smiling faces, the second chances being served alongside seafood, and knew my parents' legacy was secure. The Anchor hadn't just survived. It had become something greater. A symbol that integrity can defeat corruption, that community can overcome conspiracy, and that the bonds of chosen family can heal the wounds inflicted by blood relatives who lost their way. Every meal served was a small victory against those who think everything has a price. Some things are priceless, and now everyone in Seattle knew it. 6 months later, I received one final surprise. A package arrived from Sophia through her lawyer. Inside was her wedding ring, the diamond Brett had given her with stolen money. Sell this, her note read. Use the money for the legal clinic. Maybe it can help someone else avoid my mistakes. I'm learning to find worth in things that can't be measured in dollars. Thank you for showing me what I lost. Maybe someday, I can show you who I can become. I held the ring up to the light, watching it sparkle with false promises. Tomorrow I'd sell it and use the funds to help another family save their legacy from predators. But tonight, I tucked it away and returned to the dining room where Marcus was teaching new servers our philosophy of service, where Rosa was perfecting a new recipe, where the spirit of my parents lived on in every act of kindness. The anchor had weathered betrayal, corruption, and greed. We'd emerged not just intact, but transformed. In trying to destroy us, our enemies had revealed our true strength, the unbreakable bonds between people who choose love over money, truth over lies, and family over fortune. As I locked up that night, I touched the anchor symbol on the door and whispered a prayer of gratitude. We were home, we were whole, and we were exactly where we belonged. The last lesson my father taught me through his hidden journal was this. Life will test your anchor in storms you never expected from directions you never imagined. But if your anchor is forged from love, tempered by truth, and held by community, no storm can drag you under. You'll rise with the tide, stronger for having been tested. The anchor isn't just our restaurant's name, it's our promise that some things in this world remain steady no matter how fierce the storm. Looking back now, I see how every betrayal taught me to recognize true loyalty, how every loss revealed what really mattered, how every enemy inadvertently strengthened the very thing they tried to destroy. Sophia chose money over family and ended up with neither. Brett chose manipulation over love and found himself manipulated by the system he'd gamed. Sterling chose power over community and died alone, powerful only in his ability to destroy. But those of us who chose differently found riches beyond measure. Rosa found her daughter's redemption and a business that truly valued her. Marcus found a career that honored his integrity. The community found a gathering place that Sterling's millions couldn't buy. And I found that my parents' greatest gift wasn't the anchor itself, but the values that made it worth saving. In the end, the text message that started this journey sold the anchor for $10 million. Thanks for being abroad. Became the catalyst for discovering that some anchors can't be sold, because they are forged from something money can't buy. The unbreakable bonds of true family, the ones we're born into, and the ones we choose when blood relatives fail us. The anchor sails on, a testament that in the battle between greed and grace, grace wins if good people refuse to let go of what matters most. What would you do if your own family betrayed you for money? How far would you go to protect your family's legacy? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, or reminded you of the importance of staying true to your values, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more stories of triumph over adversity. Share this with someone who needs to remember that betrayal isn't the end of the story, it's often the beginning of discovering who truly stands with you. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, when storms come, drop anchor in the harbor of people who've proven their love through actions, not words. Until next time, hold fast to what matters most.